How in the world do we as artists compete with AI? What can we do to safeguard ourselves from being replaced? Now, let me be clear. I don't think that AI can ever really replace the role of an artist. But if you are not doing these things already, you will get left behind. With the invention of AI and accessible art at the click of a button, it's even more important to be connected to your why as an artist. What is the deeper story behind your art? Why should people care about what you have created? It's not so much about creating the perfect masterpiece anymore. It's about connecting to your humanity and what makes your expression unique. The artists who know their message and are able to communicate the value of their art, these are the ones who will withstand the test of time. We don't need more art. We need more of you in your art. It's about the quirky imperfections and weirdness that only you can bring to the table. If you are not giving your audience a reason to respond emotionally to your art, you will miss out and get lost in the shuffle. I believe that story matters so much more than it ever has. And meanwhile, artists are so consumed with perfection that they aren't even sharing their work. When what we really need is more imperfect personal art. Those of you who choose to embrace your quirks and imperfections will stand out in a sea of sameness and boring predictability. Please don't stop telling your story through your art. Welcome to a little coffee chat, and this is the part where you wonder how many times I might almost spill my coffee. Let's get started. So lately, I've been thinking a lot more about AI and how it's actually going to change the landscape of what it means to build a business as an artist. And I think that, the artists who are missing a few pieces in their strategy to market and sell their art and to make connection with their audience, the artists who struggle with that are going to be the ones who get left behind. And so I want to have this conversation because after working with quite a few artists, I think that it's one of the pieces that we really struggle with as artists. And that is really just the connection piece. And so as we move into this day and age where people can create art with the click of their mouse, why should they have a buy-in? Why are people gonna have a buy-in to your art? And honestly, I think it goes back to the value, right? Our value is not in the art that we create. And I think that so many times as artists, we create this piece of art and we place so much value in that actual art when we're missing the whole entire point, that the value is not in the actual painting, but the value is in us and who we are as a person. And I see this all the time in, this industry, especially for people who get their art on products, right? Or, they have a successful shop and then their art gets stolen and they are caught in this trap of chasing after the value that they have placed in their art when honestly the value is in them as a person. And so, as we move into this, uncharted territory where AI is taking over everything, I think that the artists who are able to show up in vulnerability and in sharing bits and pieces of who they are and in building a personal brand as an artist, those artists are going to be the ones who basically end up being, what is the word that I'm looking for? Those artists are the ones who will build a safeguard against AI taking over their jobs, right? Because how can we compete with AI as an artist? We can't produce as fast as they can. We can't create something as perfect as they do. And so I want to have this conversation because I think that artists who learn now how to embrace their flaws, how to embrace really just who they are as a person, those are the ones who are actually going to be getting ahead in the coming seasons. And I think it's because the more that AI takes over social media, then the more people are really going to be looking for authenticity. They're going to be looking for the artists who really know themselves and know their art and know exactly how to make that connection for the viewer. And so I want to talk about this. I have some notes, and it's really kind of funny because I created this script with ChatGPT, right? And yet I feel like even the videos where I do like something that's way more scripted, they are not getting the same response as me just talking to the camera. So I am going to somewhat refer to my notes, but I don't want this to feel like a polished or highly scripted video. I just want it to be like a real conversation of artists who are struggling. And I think that with all of the noise out there, with how overly saturated, the social media is becoming, I think that we have to find ways to be more authentic in the way that we show up. And when we do that, we actually, are going to find a way to stand out more, right? And so people they don't need more perfect art. They need more of you in your art. But especially in this day and age where people are chasing after the algorithm and, trying to get their art seen more, I think that we have to switch up our strategy as artists. And so I want to talk about really what that looks like and how do you as an artist really embrace your humanity, and how do you embrace your humanity more, not only in the way that you show up online, but also in your art process, in the way that you communicate about your art, and in the way that you connect with other people. Because honestly, I have found over the years that people are going to buy your art because they have a connection with you personally. And so the artists who learn how to be more vulnerable, those are the ones who are going to go farther in the day and age of AI. So, point number one, AI is not the enemy, but it absolutely is a game changer for artists. And so I want to talk about how AI is going to be changing, or has started to change, the landscape for artists. And so, especially with high production art and mass produced art, I think that it's becoming easier and easier to, make. Anyone can really just generate art at the click of a button, right? And that means that creating something beautiful is not really enough to stand out anymore. Okay? And maybe the newest trend is going to be actually just weird art, who knows? But I think that we have to learn how to shift in this new landscape. And I think that the way that we approach our art process needs to shift. And not only how we approach our art process, but also how we communicate about our art. And so it's no longer really about having skills. It's about having a story about your art, okay? And I think that the artists who really dive deeper into storytelling, those are the ones who are going to be more and more successful. It's also not about having an aesthetically pleasing look, an aesthetically pleasing brand, but it's really more about meaning. And what is the meaning that you're trying to convey through your art making process? And I work with artists all the time who really, they have these vague terms about who they are and what they do, whether it's expressive floral painter or watercolor landscape artist, right? We have to move past those titles. We have to move into our why. What is it that you paint, and why do you feel personally drawn to paint those messages, those themes in your work? And it has to move past just being cliche, right? I think it has to move into, personal experiences, and not just personal experiences, but also it has to move into connection through personal experiences, right? And the more that you as an artist are able to communicate those things, the easier it's going to be, right? And so the other thing that, we're moving out of, I think, and the other tip that I would give you is also, I think we're moving out of output, right? Just putting out a lot of art. While I think it's really important to create and be a prolific artist, I think we have to move into identity and what your unique voice is as an artist. Your edge as a person is going to be always your humanity, not how much you can produce, right? We can't compete with AI that can just generate image after image. Point number 2 is really just to embrace your imperfections. One of the things that, we see all over social media is, these highly, digitized AI photography where it takes actual photographs of who you are, and it takes your photograph and it generates AI produced images, right? And most of those images, are flawless, right? There's no, stray marks, no hesitation, no messy revisions. But what is that creating in our society? And I think personally that there's going to be almost this backlash against AI, and I think it's already started, where people are looking for imperfections. They're looking for artists who are willing to show up in their imperfections, right? And so, we as artists, I think, are going to need to really focus in and be okay with the flaws in our art, things that set us apart from something that does look perfect, right? So brush strokes and texture and weirdness and things that are quirky about ourselves. If we can tap into more of that in our art process, I think that we have a chance to stand out in this day and age. So I want you to start asking yourself, what imperfections make your art unmistakably you, right? What is it about your art, and the imperfections in your art that make you stand out as an artist? And where can I, stop polishing everything so much? Where can I stop editing so much and really just start expressing more of who I am, right? And it might be in your subject matter. It might be in embracing messy, loose lines, right? It might be in, having unusual color palettes, right? It's anything that you feel drawn to that is different and off the beaten path, right? Maybe not completely perfectly realistic, right? And so I think that the more that you embrace your imperfections as an artist, the more that you're going to stand out in this time. Point number 3 is one of the things that I help artists find and coach them through the process of identifying. And that is really just knowing what your why is as an artist, right? And so many artists that I talk to, they almost struggle with this because they don't always know why it is that they feel drawn to be an artist. But the truth is that, it's not going to be enough anymore to just make beautiful art. you have to have an understanding of what it is that is compelling you to create. And, for me, it was that I needed to find some meaning in some tragic circumstances that I had walked through as a human being. I needed to know that there was still beauty in the mess of my life. I was in a car accident and I suffered a traumatic brain injury, and I needed to find meaning in that. And for me, a lot of it was my healing process, my healing journey, looking for beauty every single day when I felt like the whole rest of my life was out of control. And also really just embracing the mess. I was thinking about it the other day, and I was thinking about how, it really was for me, especially in being a much more, I was a much more like detail-oriented person. I was much more of a planner. I liked to, have everything, planned out on a path. I liked knowing where I was going and having some sort of, certainty in my life. And my car accident totally changed that and took me out of that place. And so for me, my art making process was a place of finding acceptance with, chronic pain, with a brain injury, with things not being perfect. And so my art was a overflow of that, right? And me sharing that with you, it allows for vulnerability to happen. It allows for people to make that connection with my art. And it's something that I've done from the very beginning, is tell my story, right? And so having an understanding of why do you create that, why do you create? What does your art mean to you? Why does it matter? And really sharing those bits and pieces of your life is what's going to create a personal brand, right? And I talk about this all the time, but your why is the buy-in for people. People are not buying art from individual artists, not simply because the artist is creating something beautiful. It's because they have a connection to you. People buy people. They buy connection to the world, and they need to know what is it about your art that speaks to their own humanity, speaks to their own story, and speaks to their own struggle, right? And the artists who are able to bare their souls and be more vulnerable, those are the artists who are going to create those connections, right? It's not about a commodity of art. And I think that's the point that I was making at the beginning of this video. Our art is not a commodity. A commodity is something to where, it's a product, right? And if it's a product, it's about getting it at the cheapest possible value. Well, you can't put a price on human experience. And when we tap into that, when we tap into what is it about me that is coming through my paintbrush, and how can I embrace more of who I am in my art making process, that's what's going to attract people. That's what's going to make you a personal brand and not just a commodity. So your why creates an emotional response, It creates a meaning beyond just the visuals of your art. Your why also creates collectors who want to follow your journey, right? They're going to be your biggest cheerleader. They're going to be the ones who are, championing you as a person, right? And if you are not telling a story on a day-to-day basis through your art and talking about what it is that you are communicating, you're going to miss the whole entire point. So, if your art was a message to the world, what would it say? I invite you to answer that question and really start thinking through this process, because the more you embrace this in your own creative practice and in the way that you choose to show up in the world, the easier it's going to be to make those connections with your audience. Okay, point number 4, tell your story, not just your process. And this again goes back to allowing for people to make that personal connection to your artwork. Okay, your audience needs more than just a time-lapse process video of you creating your art. They need to see your personal journey behind what it is that you are expressing through your paintbrush, through whatever your medium actually is. They want to know about your healing process. They want to know about who you are, even just quirky things, right? They want to know about your lived experience, how you look at the world, what is the lens through which you see, right? And I see this all the time. I see artists, I go to their Instagram bio and it talks about, the mediums that they choose, what they're painting, lover of nature. Like, what does that actually mean, right? And how do you personally see the world? What are you looking for? What inspires you? These type of jumping off places are the most powerful things to be talking about. And if we don't learn how to do this, we are going to get lost in a sea of, of everything being the same, right? And this is what is going to set you apart from, AI art, right? Share stories like the moment that changed your life. Talk about why you paint what you paint, what you're learning about yourself through your art making. Okay, so point 4, tell your story, not just your process. Point number 5, create real connection with your audience. This is so incredibly powerful, right? Artists who build relationships, not just content, those are the artists who are going to survive in this next season where, there probably is going to be a lot more AI generated artwork, right? Artists who build relationships, not just content, will survive because AI can generate art, but it's not going to build trust between people, right? And one of the best ways, and I've already seen this on social media, but really one of the best ways to connect with your audience is to show your face. And I know a lot of artists feel, anxious about doing that. But really, honestly, when I am showing a painting, the videos that really take off in my Instagram feed are the ones where I'm actually showing my face as opposed to just the artwork. Okay, speak to the camera, right? This is important. Share your struggles. I know it's so hard. I know being vulnerable and putting yourself out there is such a scary thing, but speaking to the camera, talking about your struggles, letting people behind the scenes in your life, even just the mundane day-to-day things, right? Those are the connections that your audience is actually looking for. When I go to an artist's Instagram feed and all I see are photographs of art and there's no story behind it, there is no reason for people to stick around. There's no reason for people to buy or purchase your art, right? So I want you to, really think about what that looks like, right? People don't collect art, they collect people, right? And so I just want you to really start thinking about how you're choosing to show up on social media and even in the real world. And maybe you're going to decide that growing on social media isn't actually worth your time, but meeting people face to face is what really gets you excited, right? You don't have to build a business solely online. And I think people who are building in-person businesses, they have a better connection to their audience. So even artists who, are selling a lot of art online or trying to sell art online, I tell them to go do face-to-face shows because it does give them a better connection with who their actual audience is. Okay. Moving on to point number 6, I think it's really important to really focus in on building a brand and not just a portfolio. And what do I mean by that? In terms of generating images and generating art, AI can output so many images. We'll never be able to keep up or compete in that fashion, right? But AI can't build a brand that has personality, that has values, that has an ethos to it, that has an actual mission. And so I think that as we move into this time where, the lines are going to be blurred between AI, and I think as people are getting on social media more and more, they are not going to be trusting what they see as much, right? And so they are going to be looking for that authenticity factor, that aspect where they feel like someone actually sees them, someone actually knows them, and they have a personal connection with who you are as a person. And so the artists who are able to tap into story in such a way that they can be vulnerable and they can talk about who they are as a person, and not just, in such a, what am I trying to say? Not in such a cliche art world, I think oftentimes as artists, we throw around these terms of, what the messages that we're trying to portray in our art, but really just talking about our own personal experiences as a human being, right? And talking about what art has brought to our lives in a way that's relatable to the everyday person. That's what's going to attract your ideal customer and your ideal audience, right? And so when you are focused on your brand, it's not about having this, perfectly polished, quote unquote, like brand visuals, right? I think when we talk about brand, oftentimes artists go to, oh, I have this logo and my brand is a certain color and it's, a certain font, right? I'm not talking about that kind of brand. When I'm talking about a personal brand, I'm actually talking about who you are as a person and your personality, which comes out in the way that you choose to show up online, right? And so your brand has more to do with your message. It has more to do with your tone, right? Are you, a self-taught artist who loves to, hike through the Colorado mountains and that's your inspiration for your landscape paintings, right? What are your interests? What are your hobbies? What do you try to capture through your brush strokes, right? That type of thing, that is your brand, right? It has to do with your values as a person, right? What do you value? Do you value, beauty and slowing down, taking more time to be in the moment, to capture that through your art process, right? Having those things and talking about, your process and what, not only just your process, because I think artists, they get stuck in, these are my mediums and this is, like I only use oil paint and all of those things, but they're not talking about what excites them about, picking up a paintbrush and making a mess on a canvas and all of those things that they are choosing to express, right? What emotion are you being drawn to express through your art making? One of the things that I love to express is, creating colorful pieces that bring a sense of joy to your home, right? And part of my story is the fact that I started my creative practice because of a brain injury and the chronic pain that I was walking through as a person. And what I noticed that was that as I chose to paint with these bright, happy colors, that it allowed for me to break through my own depression, right? And it helped me actually cope with my brain injury. And me sharing that bit about my story actually allows for people to make that emotional connection to my art. And I get told all the time that when a customer buys one of my paintings and they hang it in their house, that every time they look at it, it just makes them happy. And so because of that, it is that like emotional connection that I'm able to make with my own personal audience and with my customers. And if you can't learn how to tap into that and what it is that your customer is going to get from your art, then why should they buy from you and not, some big box store, right? Where art is a commodity and just something to hang on their walls, right? And so if we're not making that emotional connection for our audience and talking about who we are as a brand, there's no reason for them to opt in or to invest in a painting that was made with human hands, made with love, and has that deeper meaning to it. So I encourage you to really go deeper into not just, this is my aesthetic as an artist, and this is the way that I choose to paint, but really go into the message, the tone of your work, the emotion that you're creating, the way that you are choosing to show up authentically as you in also a social media capacity, right? And finding ways to share more bits and pieces of who you are as a person. That's what's going to attract your customer in the day and age when AI is making it easy to create art in mass numbers, right? So point number 7 is that it's really important for you as an artist in this new landscape to actually really focus in on the one thing that AI can never replace, which is your humanity and your human experience, right? And I think that people purchase art from artists that they can see themselves in, right? People are going to purchase a painting that resonates with them on a deeper level that they can relate to as a person. And this is why it's so incredibly powerful to answer this question of what was I going to say? Totally just lost my train of thought. Oh, finishing this sentence by saying this art is for, and then finish the sentence, right? This art is for the person who has just experienced a really deep loss, right? This art is for the woman who is going through a huge transformation. This art is for the woman who is leaving behind an old version of themselves and stepping into a new place where they are honoring who they are and the gifts that they have inside of them. This art is for the person who is looking for a deeper sense of rest in their home and wants to bring the soothing aspects of the outdoors and nature into their house, right? So finding those themes and those messages that, make you human, that's what's going to set you apart from other people and other accounts, other art that is being offered out there. Focusing in on your own human experience is so incredibly powerful. So, and it's because AI is just drawing from data points, right? We, as humans, we draw from our lived moments, from love, from trauma, from loss, from curiosity, from spirituality, from nostalgia, from identity, right? I want you to answer some of these questions when it comes to drawing from these your human experiences. What have I lived through that shapes my art, right? Answering that question, going deeper into that. What emotional themes keep showing up in my life and in my work, right? When I first started my creative practice, it was that I wanted to find beauty in the mess that I was having to untangle in my life. I wanted to find beauty that was something that grounded me in, feeling like I was losing everything, feeling like I couldn't come to grips with all of the chronic pain that I was having to deal with on a day-to-day basis, right? What inner questions am I exploring visually? That's a great question to ask yourself. I feel like, in some of my work, I'm really exploring, joy and delight. And some of my pieces, I like to create something with a childlike wonder, right? Really asking yourself, what is it that why do I need to express this? Why am I drawn to that? And if you haven't gotten to that place in your art making process, and if you haven't really found those themes, I encourage you to go deeper in that, right? And really start to explore, what it is in your process of creating that really brings you joy and gets you excited to get up in the morning every day. And I have a whole range of free content on my site that might actually help you. I have a style blueprint quiz that will help you go deeper in finding your style. I also have a 100 days of imperfect practice where I go deeper into exploring specific themes in your art and what that looks like. So if you don't really know where to start in finding those themes and expressions that feel the most like you, I highly recommend those programs. Okay, so in closing, I just want to remind you, the value in your art has nothing to do with the art itself. The value in your art is tied to your identity as a person. The value in your art is tied to your story, your life experiences. And if you haven't ventured into being more vulnerable, into sharing more of your story, into talking more about yourself, I encourage you to start doing that now. Start doing it right now before things start going even more crazy with AI, and really give people a reason to opt in to your offerings and into your art, right? We have to take this time now. Otherwise, we are going to get lost in the sea of the algorithm, and we will not stand out enough to attract the people that we're meant to reach. And that's why I'm making this video. I want to help artists get their art out into the world because it does matter. You know, I was recently looking at some different articles, and I'll have to see if I can find them and maybe do some videos on this, but they're saying that our brains really do find a sense of calm, a sense of peace, and, you know, what is the word that I'm looking for? When we look at original art, it is extremely calming to us. And there's like been some studies about how we can even tell the difference between reproduced art and original art. And if that's the case, I think our brains know the difference between AI art and original art as well. And I think that as a society and as a culture, we are craving that connection, that authenticity. And I think that the artists who choose to put themselves out there and be more vulnerable, that those artists are going to have so much more success in building businesses and in building careers where they are able to thrive as artists. So I encourage you to do that. I encourage you to share more of who you are and share more of your message and what it is that you are on a mission for as an artist, right? Being an artist is a calling. It's not something that we just wake up and we're like, oh, I'm good at art, I think I'll sell some. That's not enough anymore. We have to have a deeper calling and a deeper mission as an artist. Otherwise, we will not continue because it won't be sustainable. So I encourage you, we don't need more art, we need more of you in your art. And this is your reminder, or this is your sign to start putting yourself out there more. Start talking more about who you are, your identity, and start building your personal brand today.